Well, after a day of obvious intense emotions there at Williamson Street, questions about police accountability and public trust are once again taking center stage. And tonight, Common Council members are getting an update on Madison's police oversight system. They're talking about what comes next for the Police Civilian Oversight Board and for the Office of the Independent Monitor. WMTV's Mark Charter was listening in on that meeting all evening long. He joins us now live from the newsroom with some of the key takeaways here. And Mark, what did you learn?
Well, Tim, that meeting was held virtually tonight just as a safety precaution, as tensions were pretty high, as we just saw on Willy Street. Just about an hour ago on that meeting, there was a lot of support for Madison's police oversight system. Several council members say the Office of the Independent Monitor needs more resources to fully carry out its mission. Well, the office wants to add staff and strengthen its ability to independently review police complaints and improve transparency as well. They say this is especially important after what's unfolded the last couple of weeks. One council member said supporting the office with the right funding and then strengthening the Police Civilian Oversight Board are not anti-police measures.
They are pro-accountability, pro-transparency, and ultimately pro-community. Strong oversight benefits everybody. This action alone will not solve every problem. There is still much work to do to address systemic bias, rebuild public trust, and ensure transparency when critical incidents occur.
The office was created to independently review police conduct and improve transparency as well. It is seeking about $900,000 in the 2027 budget. Reporting live in the newsroom, Mark Charter, WMTV 15 News.